How do you navigate through a sea of family possessions in the 120-year-old house that you recently inherited? Over the past few years, we've seen the loss of many loved ones and now face the unenviable task of picking through over a half a century of the old and quirky items left behind, all while discovering long-lost treasures and cherished memories that have become a part of our family history. Join me for an intimate glimpse into our family's past, celebrating the essence of a few curious items that will hold a permanent place of remembrance in the 1906 historic house that we now call home. My name is Laura, and this is the Artful Homestead. This is my father's Bolsey Model B rangefinder camera. It was produced by the Bolsey Company between the years of 1947 and 1956, which means my father bought it prior to marrying my mom. So it's been about 75 years for this item. But there's just something about old technology that is deeply beautiful, especially when it comes to cameras, and that makes this item so compelling to be displayed as a treasured piece in a well-curated home. And this one's different since it's been in my family for so long. I happen to love the look of the lens. It must have felt so high-tech back then, and the camera has the feel of the retro tech aesthetic that makes this a delightful item to have as a part of our collection. Does it work? Well, who knows? I won't actually be testing it out. I'm far too enamored with my DSLR, but showcasing this antique as a part of our family legacy adds a touch of nostalgia, and it honors my father's passion for photography, which carried on through the family so many years later. And here is another of my favorite from my dad as well. It is his Hafner 1010 O-gauge wind-up toy train from when he was a child. My guess is that this is about circa 1935. Now, it sold originally for around $3, and it was considered to be a rather low-end toy, which is a bit amusing because no one makes toys like this anymore. I remember this item coming out of the closet ever so often and getting played with for a little bit, and then put back into its hiding place and being forgotten for a few years thereafter. It's actually amazing that I managed to locate this when I was cleaning out my parents' house. I'm looking forward to celebrating the fact that it's almost 100 years old, and yes, it still works. Our family had quite a collection of these Hummels, and they hung on the wall of every house I grew up in since I was a small child. They were given as gifts to my Nana Swink over the course of a number of years in the mid-60s, and they now belong to me, and I occasionally give one or two away. But it was in the 80s that it was determined that they were actually worth quite a bit of money, since these particular Hummels were actually made in Germany, and some have the artist's signatures on them. And the market on these things have since bottomed out, as collectibles do, but I really was never interested in selling them anyway. This one is my favorite, a single little boy in an apple tree. This now is the piece that best represents the old boarding house that we now call home, not to mention the little boy who lives here, and this old house is now known by the name Applewood. So it is this figure that is really very special, and will have the most honored place in the house for years to come. This is my mom's American Woman's Cookbook, published in 1948 and currently out of print. Now, I'm quite certain it once belonged to my Nana Swink, and yes, it's a pretty worn old book. But of all the nostalgic things I show here today, this is one of my favorites since I have so very many memories of this book growing up. I happen to have a dedicated video on it because this actually has a write-up on how to boil water, and not to mention a ton of very bizarre recipes that I can't imagine anyone serving their family unless, of course, they actually hated each other. I think this dish here is some kind of jello with noodles in it and a center filled with cream and some kind of canned fish. Yeah, they thought enough of this item to make a feature photo for it. And of course these jelly delights, well, they seem to be way too common back then. But this page here, 487, has a recipe for chocolate drop cookies, and I love this page because it shows just how often this recipe was made when I was growing up. But the reality is that these cookies look like brownies, but actually just taste like dried chocolate cake. They weren't my favorite at all. I was much more fond of the coffee cake here on page 113. But if you ever come across this book, grab it, because it's worth having a recipe for peanut butter and onion sandwiches and frozen cheese salad. These Basset Hound figures are probably the newest of all the items I found hiding around the house. My guess is that they are as recent as 1980 or 1990s and are basically just mass-produced ceramic decorations, but what I love about them so much is that they remind me of my mother-in-law and my father-in-law and the long family history of Bassets that lived here, one being a Mr. Maximilian von Snuff, who was the family's beloved Basset from years ago. And these salt and pepper shakers seem to be branded as Big Sky Canine, but I don't know anything more than that. Nothing on where they were made and what they may have been originally sold for. So, do you know? If so, leave me a note in the comments below. And as for this little guy, he occupied the space on a bookcase for many years, so he too is going to stay. But let's just take a second to appreciate the personality of both of these family heirlooms, since they are both too charming to be lost. This item was quite a find in this old house, but certainly not a surprising one. My mother-in-law was quite a talented seamstress, and we are now trying to deal with no less than 7 sewing machines that were squirreled away throughout the house. And we thought there was only 3, to be honest, and we didn't know she had quite that many. And this one is an antique Singer, which I believe was manufactured around 1923, and it happens to be my favorite. It is a whopping 25 plus pounds of cast iron greatness, and like all old technologies, it seems to have an aura of design and beauty that you just don't see anymore. Occasionally, I have need of a sewing machine for basic straight stitching, and since this cast iron monolith fits the aesthetic of the house, I've decided to try my hand at restoring it. Now, this is a future project for now, so I'll find a place for this girl to patiently wait, but I'm happy to just let her sit and look pretty for the time being. This is my father-in-law's slide rule, and if you don't know what that is, you probably can't drive a standard 5-speed either, but that's okay. It's not that hard to learn. These things became very obsolete when the calculator came onto the scene, and here we are again. Old technology has a beauty to it that electronics simply never will. This is the way they used to add, subtract, multiply, and divide. It's as simple as that. Now, my father used one of these as well, and he taught me how to read one when I was pretty young. And then one day he brought home all his old drafting tools because they had been replaced by AutoCAD. But these unique family heirlooms are so worth having and displaying, simply for the memories and nothing else. This is an R. Novak built button box. It was made in Klagenfurt, Austria, close to the border of Slovenia. I don't know anything about accordions, and my research has been absolutely fruitless, so if you know, please let me know in the comments. This belonged to my father-in-law, who apparently played it learning on his own rather than through any kind of formal lesson. It appears to be older. I'm thinking well before 1970. It is aged rather beautifully, as the bellows seem to be in pristine condition. Now, I have a degree in music from Baldwin Wallace University and had the privilege of being in close contact with all kinds of instruments, from harpsichords to harps, bass flutes to dulcimers, all kinds of weird things that make music, and this is the first time I've actually been in the presence of this kind of old world instrument. It's quite a joy to have it in the house, and hopefully we will be able to safely display it in the future. Sadly though, this is the first I remember seeing this item around the house, and I didn't get to hear him play it, and that is a huge loss for me. But my 7-year-old has taken a bit of an interest in it, so I'm happy to let him play around with it. But we have this ongoing issue with, well, this. She's a singer, all right, in G flat nonetheless. So how do you navigate the sea of family possessions, especially when you're going through a difficult transition such as this one? Well, I can tell you it's not easy. Because in the last 5 years, we've lost a good number of family members and 2 of our 3 dogs. So needless to say, this video was pretty special, as it wasn't just a list of quirky things that I found at a random thrift store on some Saturday afternoon. These things were gathered as a result of clearing out 2 homes of loved ones who have passed on, and the desire to keep as much as you can is overwhelming. But we need to really curate, not just collect. The best way to honor family is to have these things on display so that you can see and enjoy them, creating a clean, organized home that's easy to live in and free of stress. That's where the value is, in the memories. And that's all for me today. Tell me in the comments about your unique family relics, especially a memory that's attached to something very common or some really great find. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for stopping by, and as always, leave a like, and I'll see you next time.